This summer we're in the month of July looking at the book of Psalms. And if you've been here, we're just taking each of the major types of Psalms and kind of breaking them down and giving an example of one of them and talking about how those Psalms were used and kind of how they play into our lives today. Because I have a feeling a lot of folks, like myself, feel the book of Psalms is really just a stuffy old hymn book that really has no pertinence in daily life today. But in reality, it's very applicable to our daily life today. And how we go about living that life, and how we go about worshiping God, and how we go about being the church. And we get to a type of psalm today that doesn't seem at first to be very useful. It's one of the parts of the book of Psalms I really wasn't looking forward to working with when we did this, when I planned out this sermon series, because it seems kind of boring and dry. Today we get to a type of psalm called the Royal Psalm. And this is a type of psalm that deals with the monarchy in the nation of Israel. It deals with the official customs and leadership and government of the nation. And it seems boring and dry. It's taking boring Old Testament genealogy and marrying it with your government and civics class. So it's the perfect cure for insomnia at first, you think. Or at least I thought so as I started reading. But it's really actually very meaningful for what we do today. And to begin that, I want to call your attention to an actual object lesson. If you grab your hymnal, like I said a few weeks ago, yours is a little different color than mine because I have a personalized one. But if you turn all the way back in the very back of your hymnal to page 864, it'll look like this. A service of Christian marriage. And there you'll see over the next few pages outlined the basic standard go-to order of worship for a service of marriage in the United Methodist Church. And it's outlined there, and every conceivable thing. Actually, if you come into the office and want to get married, or actually if you come to the office and you have a funeral, I'll turn to one of those pages. I actually have them printed out and easy to hand out to those who come in. But when you begin to plan a marriage or a funeral, you turn to those pages and you use them sort of as a guide, as a template. And they guide you into what to expect in that ceremony. They guide you into what to expect, not only the ceremony, but also in that moment in your life. And also enshrined in them is also what to expect, not just in that moment of life, but further down the road. So if you turn in the service of marriage, you turn a couple pages and you'll see the vows. And that's an order that sets expectation between two people. I pledge myself to you. And then you turn to the other one. And I pledge myself to you. They're pledging themselves completely, one to the other. And you turn, and without fail in most weddings, you turn, and they'll read through them. And I always instruct people to read through them, because without fail, they'll get up there, and they'll look, and they'll see they're standing in front of the congregation, and they'll freeze. But I always instruct them to read through it, and they'll get up there, and they'll have read through it usually if they've listened. But most times they won't. They'll just nod and they'll get there and they'll freeze. But when they begin those vows, they begin to say them. And it's a very heightened emotional moment. They begin to say them. You're standing there and there's a person on the other side of you, and they're holding hands and they're looking at each other and they're saying those vows. The weight of expectation and reality in that moment hits, and it hits them like a ton of bricks. You can also do the same if you turn a few more pages over in the hymnal, you'll see the service of death and resurrection. That is the memorial or funeral service in the Methodist Church. And the same thing happens when you plan one of those, a different set of emotions, but very similar, and you're sitting there and you're planning it, and you get everything ordered, and the family's exhausted, because if you don't know this, when someone passes away, there's so much paperwork and planning and organizing and logistics that have to happen. And by the time they get the service planned out with the pastor, they're just emotionally, not just sad and depressed, they're emotionally drained. But the same thing happens when they get up there and you're reading the liturgy for that service. My favorite one coming from 2 Corinthians, the perishable has to put on the imperishable. The mortal has to put on immortality. And you begin reading those lines. It's the same sinking feeling that you see the two people getting married have as the bride and the groom exchange vows, as the family hears the liturgy read for the one that passed, that sinking weight of feeling, that expectation. That something bigger than yourself is happening. That feeling sets in both of those situations, in both of those circumstances. And that feeling, this liturgy in the back of our hymnal, this template for worship, this is our connection to these royal psalms. This is how they used them. In some cases, they use these royal psalms not just as songs or poems about the king, but they were used in an official capacity. In state ceremonies and religious worship services that recognize who the king was, or in the case of today's psalm, sets out expectations for a king. These were things that they read just like we read together for a marriage or a funeral, things that designated officially what was happening. When you come into a worship service and the pastor stands up and says, "Dearly beloved, we're gathered here today to join in union, so and so and so and so," you know and you expect it to be a marriage from that point on. It'd also be really weird if you just walked into a church service and it was a marriage for someone and you didn't know why you were there. But they used these psalms like we use the liturgy of our church to set the tone for whatever official event. The royal psalms help distinguish and set apart certain acts of worship. The consecration of a king, the assumption of royal duties, the reality of king as defender and protector, the institution of the monarchy and the nation of Israel. These are things the royal psalms set aside. There's things that these acts of worship made special to the people. The same way you might see our marriage vows making a marriage service special, the same way you might see the internment making a funeral service special. They use these psalms to make special the reality of who their king was. Not just who their king was, they also use them to make firm the reality of what the expectations of that office were. Because for them, the king wasn't just a figurehead. I know a lot of monarchs in our day are little more than figureheads. You have the Queen of England and the whole royal family over there. They don't wield a whole lot of political influence on their system, or even any of the other nations that they're the head of. The Queen, I was unaware of this until one of my friends moved to Canada, but the Queen is actually the head of state for Canada, as well as Australia, and as well as a dozen other Commonwealth nations. But there's no major expectation on her or their monarchy. All of that falls to the prime ministers and the parliaments of those nations. Instead, the nation of Israel's monarchy was absolute and it was much more powerful. There were expectations people had of the king. And in this case of today's hymn of King Solomon. And it's plainly spelled out in this royal psalm what those expectations were of the king. And I think, which is why I selected it for our example of a royal psalm, that this highlights one of the greatest leadership qualities in our faith as well. If you go back and you read the selection, you could read all of Psalm 72, but some of it is more of a cause and effect. The big middle part I left out is more of the effect of what happens. But the cause is verses 1 through 4 and 12 through 14, where God spells out an expectation, the people spell out an expectation before God that their king will serve those who cannot serve themselves. That their king will be a king whose concern is for the folks who are caught in the throes of injustice. It will be for the people who cannot provide for themselves. It will be for the people who are oppressed. And in these lines, we can see what servant leadership is and what it isn't. We can see in our culture. You know, if you read my article in the index this week, I took a good bit out of the sermon for it. But there's this idea in our culture where we all dream of being the boss. And I'll admit that was very much me several years ago when I was in seminary and as a youth minister at a big church, and the associate pastor who was over our department would walk in and he'd say, we got to do this and this and this, and you need to change this and change that. And I remember I'd sit there like, one day I'm going to be the pastor and I'm going to do all the right things always and it's going to be great, everything's going to work. And I imagine there are a lot of people that do the same thing, especially when they're younger, and they think about what it would be like if I was the boss. If I was in charge. If I was the leader of the organization, I would just do this, and it would be perfect, and it would be great. And I know everyone thinks that way. All you have to do is get on Facebook, and don't read the article, because no one does that. Just go to the comments section, where people immediately start pegging on what should actually be done, without having fully read the article. Or if you don't do social media, you could just go through the local niche hole-in-the-wall restaurant where all the good old boys gather, and you can hear the same kind of criticisms, but in person instead of online, of, well, they should do this, and no, they should do that, and they should do this. All you see, whether they're in the comments or in person, there are people who did the same thing I did. Wishing they could be the boss, wishing they could be the leader, and saying, well, I would just make it all right and perfect. But the reality is that the mantle of leadership is much more complex and much more challenging than people who like to levy criticism can imagine. And this psalm spells that out perfectly. If you look, there are 4 different people groups that this psalm calls the king to pay attention to. The folks who are under oppression, the folks who are being served a great injustice, the poor and the needy, and the children of those in need. Just in those 4 groups alone, you'd be pulled in a multitude of directions. How can you, in a conceivable way, care for all 4 of those groups without finding conflict with someone somewhere else? It's impossible. It's impossible. And yet, one of the chief things that this psalm calls the king to do, that the people expect from their leader, that God enshrines in his book of Psalms, is that they would care for those 4 groups of people. And as Solomon carried out this task, can you only imagine if there had been Facebook then? The kind of criticisms and comments that would have happened? The kind of jabbing and the king should do this, the king should do that. We don't really need to do this, we don't really need to do that. And yet, the psalm still forces the question, who should the king care for? Well, he should care for the oppressed, the people suffering great injustice. He should care about the poor and the needy. He should care about their children. A leader's first responsibility, as dictated by Psalm 72, is not to themselves, but to the people they serve. And Psalm 72 lifts this reality up. And it enshrines this reality, not in a passing way. It's not some Sunday sermon in July that we've forgotten by Advent. But Psalm 72 enshrines this expectation of the King of Israel in their book of worship. The same way that we enshrine the expectation between a man and a woman in the act of marriage, the same way that we enshrine the expectation of something beyond this life in the liturgy of a funeral. This was not a passing self-help book. This was not some fad that was going to be here today and gone tomorrow. No, they enshrine this permanently as who the king is and should be, what leaders should be about in the core of how they worship. And so I put to you the same question I put to the children. Because the reality is, if you're sitting here, we're all leaders somehow. You might be at work, and that might be your position. You might be the boss. You might be the executive. You might be the person in charge. Or maybe you're not. Maybe you're just working. Or maybe you're a student. Or maybe you don't work at all. Maybe you're at home with a family. But the reality is, wherever you are, you're a leader because people are watching you. And people who are watching you are basing their behavior and their actions on how you act and how you behave. I am shamelessly stealing that point from my middle school vice principal at a little behavioral assembly we had, a few of us, in which this gentleman, Mr. Atmore, remarked to us that eyes are always watching us, and that we should be conscious of how we behave because eyes are always watching us and other people are going to act because of the way we act. And the truth is, wherever you are in life, whatever you're doing, from the top to the bottom of an organization, from sitting in the pew on church on Sunday to simply just doing the laundry at home, however you act, other people will act because eyes are always watching you. And as a people of faith, let us not lead them into cynicism. Let us not lead them into the callous nature of this age. Let us lead them to Christ. Because wherever we are, whatever we're doing, eyes are always watching. And in some way, we're leading someone somewhere. Let's make sure how we live leads them to the kingdom and doesn't leave them here on earth. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.